This man was once the notorious lean tiger of Hejian in the martial arts world, but now he is reduced to the owner of a shabby audio and video store. His name is Li Yan. As a young man, he traveled all over the world to learn from renowned martial arts masters, and established a fearsome reputation in the underworld. However, he was diagnosed with acute leukemia a month ago, and now he can only spend his remaining days in a decrepit little shop in China, a young woman softly asked as she walked in from outside. "Are you Mr. Li Yan?" The woman asked with a smile. "Ah, yes, I am." The woman standing in front of him was dressed in a trench coat, with a high, prominent nose and shallow eye sockets. Her features were beautiful, and she exuded a sense of efficiency and purpose. Li Yan glanced subtly at the taciturn man standing behind her and replied, "I am a director of the Chinese Martial Arts Association, from Guangdong. My name is Lei Jing, and my grandfather is Lei Hongsheng." She revealed a set of pearly white teeth. "According to seniority, I should call you Brother Tot." She took Li Yan's hand, which was warm and firm to the touch. Li Yan's eyes, which seemed to be covered with a thin layer of dust, only sparkled at the mention of the name Lei Hongsheng. "Oh, please, sit, don't mind the small space." The woman sat gracefully on a chair nearby, studying Li Yan in silence. She had seen photos of her grandfather with this man from years ago, but found it hard to reconcile the sharp, rebellious young man in the photos with the present owner of this audiovisual shop. "I often heard my grandfather mention you, always saying that you were the most talented person he had ever met." The man turned and took a thermos, pouring water as he asked, "Is the old man still in good health?" The woman lowered her gaze. "He passed away earlier this year." Li Yan's hand remained steady, not a drop of water spilled. He put down the thermos and looked deeply at the woman. "Is there anything I can do for you?" The woman pursed her lips and said, "I hope that Brother Li can accompany me to Guangdong and serve as a consultant for the association." Li Yan raised an eyebrow and said, "Miss Lei, you must have heard what kind of person I am." To be frank, in the martial arts world, the name Li Yan is notorious. "Why do you think I can help you?" Lei Jing was silent for a moment, then smiled and said, "Rather than notorious, it's more like infamous. Maybe those people won't respect you, Brother Li, but they will definitely fear you." At this, Li Yan couldn't help but laugh. "That sounds reasonable. Unfortunately, you are too late." The man picked up his cup. "Miss Lei, you are educated. AML, do you know what it means?" Lei Jing was taken aback, then a shadow crossed her heart. She cautiously said, "Acute myeloid leukemia." Li Yan took a sip of water. "I was diagnosed with this disease a month ago. Your grandfather knows that I don't have any relatives." He laughed, "So, I'm afraid I can't help you." The woman looked at her nails for a moment, then said dryly, "The medical conditions in the south are much better than here, and I know some famous doctors abroad. Leukemia is not an incurable disease. Even if you don't have any siblings, Brother Li, it's entirely possible to find a matching bone marrow donor." The woman looked up, her whole demeanor becoming more sharp. "Maybe my visit has put Brother Li in a difficult position, but," Lei Jing chose her words carefully, "the association is the fruit of my grandfather's life's work. I can't just stand by and watch it become a tool for some politicians to manipulate or profit from." "Manipulate," Li Yan suddenly interrupted her. He sipped the hot water and played with the cup in his hand. He smiled at the woman, an inexplicable hint of wickedness in his demeanor. "Why isn't it manipulation when the association is in your hands? Can you tell me, Miss Lei, what's the difference between you and those politicians you despise?" Li Yan's words were quite blunt, causing the man beside Lei Jing to frown. The woman's face remained calm as she slowly explained, "The Chinese Martial Arts Association was founded by my grandfather. I have been involved in its affairs since I was 16. No one understands it better than I do, and no one loves it more." Li Yan shook his head and put down the cup. "When I shook hands with you just now, Miss Lei, your hand was very soft. You haven't practiced martial arts, have you?" The woman pursed her lips. "I've been in poor health since I was a child, and the martial arts in my family are too domineering. So, I only practiced some breathing exercises to regulate my qi. So, you see." Li Yan lowered his head and suddenly changed the subject. "Do you like to read martial arts novels, Miss Lei?" Lei Jing was somewhat puzzled by the question. She attempted to respond, "Jin Yong. Lao Shi, soul-severing spear." The woman clearly didn't understand what Li Yan meant. However, the man beside her squinted. "Anyway, I'm really too sick to help you. Thank you for your kindness. If you two would like to stay for a meal, I've made dumplings. If not, please feel free to leave. And, please light a stick of incense for the old man for me." At this point, there was clearly no need to continue the conversation. After a while, Lei Jing stood up silently. Instead of leaving immediately, she took out a business card and placed it on the table under Li Yan's gaze. She said, "So many people have told me how arrogant Li Yan is. They would never imagine what you look like now." Li Yan tilted his head but said nothing. "But my grandfather always admired you, always. Do you know how he described you?" Lei Jing looked straight at the man, mimicking her grandfather's tone. "A martial artist should have a 3-point evil spirit. In my life, I've seen many young people, but only this rascal has just enough of this evil spirit. Whether you agree to my request or not, Brother Li, I sincerely hope that you haven't lost this 3-point evil spirit." With that, Lei Jing turned and left with the middle-aged man. Li Yan sat still for a while, then drained the 2 cups of hot water and laughed. "What a formidable girl." He wiped his nose with a tissue, not caring about the bright red blood on it, and casually threw it aside. He then lay down on the sofa. 3-point evil spirit, ha. Covering his forehead with his right hand, Li Yan remembered the spirited old man with thick eyebrows, and a bitter smile crossed his face. "I'm sorry, old man." Click, a pair of shiny black leather shoes stepped onto the floor of his home. Li Yan recognized the owner of the shoes as the man who had been standing behind Lei Jing. "Is there anything else?" Li Yan sat up and looked up, only to feel a chill down his spine. His chestnut-colored pupils contracted uncontrollably. The door frame creaked under the man's pale fingers. He was crouched like a beast, his face a bloody mess, with white tendons hanging down from the raw, red flesh. His face was almost unrecognizable. Hearing Li Yan's question, the man slowly raised his head. His eyes bulged outwards, bloodshot and grotesque. Li Yan inhaled the cold air bit by bit. Accompanied by the impassioned percussion music on the TV screen, he swore in short, strong words. "Fuck. This is definitely not a human." As Li Yan was thinking, the terrifying creature launched a fierce roundhouse kick, like a bolt of black lightning, targeting Li Yan's temple. Li Yan instinctively stretched out his arm to block, but was blasted sideways by the massive force. Before Li Yan could get up, a domineering shadow fell overhead. He couldn't dodge in time and was kicked on the right shoulder. His entire arm was numb and tingling instantly. Then his vision blurred, and the tip of the shoe, carrying a gust of wind, aimed maliciously at his face. The continuous kicks, like a sudden downpour, left him with no way to avoid. If the kick aimed at his face landed, Li Yan would either die or be crippled. Without thinking, Li Yan hugged the man's flying leg with both hands. His body curled up naturally, and his left fingers quietly aimed at the man's knee and stabbed viciously. Crack! Thud! The man's right foot kicked Li Yan's elbow, but he fell to the ground with a thud. His face, blurred with flesh and blood, was facing Li Yan. In the blink of an eye, Li Yan, who had been passively beaten, reached out and grabbed the man's shoulder. He leaned back, and the man's upper body fell forward uncontrollably. There was a flash of fierceness in Li Yan's eyes. He rolled over, grabbed the man's left wrist, and pressed his right leg against the man's neck. There was a snap, and the man's entire arm was brutally torn off. Then, Li Yan propped against the man's lower back, grabbed his other arm, and twisted and pulled it cleanly, ignoring the teeth-gritting sound of bone fracture. His right foot kicked hard at the man's shin. The kick was fierce and accurate, and the man's lower leg was kicked out of alignment, twisting irregularly outward. Only then did he stand up, looking down at the man on the ground who was struggling constantly. His gaze lingered on the man's rotting face for a long time. Looking at the man struggling on the ground and still unable to get up, Li Yan sighed and turned to get his phone. But at this moment, the man on the ground suddenly sprang up in a way that completely defied joint movement and bit at Li Yan's thigh with his pale teeth. As if he had eyes on the back of his head, Li Yan twisted his waist and kicked, his right foot carrying the sound of wind, and kicked viciously at the man's temple. The man's neck was broken by this kick. His head, like a broken spring, twisted a full 90 degrees and hung at an eerie angle on his neck. The scene was too brutal to describe. Li Yan licked his gums and spat out a mouthful of blood that was quite scary. His fierce gaze swept over the man's body, with a cold, bloody aura spraying freely. There was no trace of the mild-mannered audio shop owner left. Brilliant, truly brilliant. The single-leg tan kick emphasizes continuous momentum. Once it gains the upper hand, the opponent basically has no chance to turn the tables. I didn't expect it to be defeated by the fierce white horse overturning hoof. It's said that the Li family of Hejian is excellent at spears and swords, but your grappling skills are also quite sharp. He looked up to see a short, fat man standing at the door. The man was wearing a white tank top, bell-bottoms, and flip-flops. His hair was greasy, and he looked very unkempt. The words, "dead fatty," perfectly summed him up, with no discrepancies. However, Li Yan noticed that behind the fat man was a pitch-black area. There was no moonlight, no neon lights, no smoke from barbecues, no roar of cars, just a thick, terrifying blackness. Where's the woman? Li Yan stared at the fat man in front of him. You have strong adaptability, your moves and reactions are top-notch, very good. Feeling Li Yan's increasingly hostile gaze, the fat man smiled and pointed at the ground. Li Yan swept his eyes over it, only to find that the man's body on the ground had disappeared. Only the fallen sofa and the mess could prove that everything that had just happened was real. Am I dreaming? Li Yan touched his forehead. Maybe nothing had happened. He had drunk 3 cups of hot water and fallen asleep on the sofa. There were no shoes, no man with falling flesh on his face, nothing. I have nothing to do with those 2 people. The only similarity is that we are all very interested in you. Don't worry, I just used a thought from the bald man to say hello to you, that's all. They knew nothing about it. Li Yan didn't speak, waiting for the fat man's follow-up. Let me introduce myself. Hey, what's my name again? The fat man reached into his pocket and pulled out a bunch of things, such as crumpled vitamin packaging paper, a discount card for a barber shop with a naked woman on it, used sanitary napkins, and so on. Finally, he pulled out a dirty ID card. On it was clearly written the 3 big characters Wang X Yang. Anyway, you can call me Wang Yang, but you can also call me another name. The fat man gave a strange smile. Taper. Li Yan glanced at him. He scoffed. Devil, do you want to eat dumplings? Wang Yang was taken aback for a moment, then laughed out loud, and the laughter became more and more hysterical. You're too funny. Ha ha ha. Li Yan squinted his eyes. He could swear to his 3rd great-grandfather that he really wanted to imprint his shoe viciously on the face of this greasy fat man, provided he could do it. I can save your life. The fat man suddenly stopped laughing. Li Yan stared at him and asked, do you have my matching bone marrow? That's too elementary. Wang Yang shook his head. I can give you something better. Li Yan let his hands fall. He pondered for a while, until Wang Yang got a little impatient. What can I do for you? Wang Yang spread his hands. Try it and you'll see, but this is a road of no return, sounds better than waiting to die. There was a fleeting cold light in Li Yan's eyes. Come on, let's hear it. The fat man grinned, his face becoming unusually dark and solemn. Then, come on. Behind him, a wave of abyss-like blackness surged out, engulfing the astonished Li Yan completely. At that moment, Li Yan felt like he was falling. He was enveloped in blackness, and in front of his eyes appeared countless bizarre, incredible scenes, black chains spanning the horizon, tens of millions of pounds of green copper cast into a towering hull, golden-red vultures dancing in the sky, in the dark clouds, nurturing dense blue-purple plasma, and in the hull, staring at him, countless huge mysterious shadows. The incredibly hot blood burned Li Yan's eyes red. And through the scarlet curtain, he saw clearly one of those huge, mysterious shadows, 18 wings of varying lengths, 9 heads that looked fierce and strange, 1 neck bloody. Wake her up, my walker. Who are you? Li Yan couldn't make a sound, he could only shout in his heart, cold, dark. When Li Yan opened his eyes, he was greeted by a row of white fluorescent tubes. The surrounding noisy shouts and pungent smell of cigarettes gave him a mild headache. He sat up, feeling the concrete floor beneath him, and looked around. At this moment, Li Yan was sitting against the wall, facing a 5-meter square boxing ring. To his left, hundreds of seats, arranged in a scattered manner, were filled with people. They were yelling at the top of their lungs towards the ring, frantically waving the white tickets in their hands, their eyes red with excitement. Is this an underground fight club? Where's the fat guy? Li Yan muttered to himself. At this moment, in the midst of the deafening noise, a raspy, deep voice clearly reached Li Yan's ears. Wandering One, welcome to Yanfu. We have prepared a new identity for you that won't arouse any suspicion. Feel free to make a scene. Following this, Li Yan clearly saw some smoke-stained black characters on the wall. Time, AD 1986. Location, Mongkok, 22.35 degrees north latitude, 113.5 degrees east longitude, north of the New Territories in Hong Kong. Kowloon walled city, cramped, dirty, crowded, dark as night, drug trafficking, smuggling, murder, robbery. Casinos, brothels, opium dens, heroin dens, dog meat restaurants are everywhere, law and order are chaotic, and the underworld is rampant. This is the city of sin, the city of garbage, the city of violence, and the city of huge profits. The requirements for this Yanfu event are as follows. 1. Fight to the 7th round on the Kowloon boxing stage. Point 2. Obtain any fragment of the ancient novel Go Chen Lu. Point 3. Awaken the Guhuo Bird in the ancient novel Go Chen. When any one condition is completed, the Yanfu event officially begins. You can stay for up to 1 month. Please note, once you lose the boxing match, regardless of the current progress of the Yanfu event, you will return immediately. Gift from Taper, obtain additional purchase rights. 1/1, your personal information is as follows: name, Li Yan. Status, high fever, inflammation, bleeding, specialization, ancient martial arts. 81%. Li Yan stood up, staring at the line of specialization for a while, always feeling that there was something unfinished about it, but he couldn't figure it out at the moment. Just as Li Yan was thinking about these things, a hand smelling of sweat and cheap cigarettes slapped his head. Slap. Li Yan grabbed the wrist of the person who hit him, just about to exert force, and heard a burst of cursing in his ear. Standing here playing zombie? Damn shovel. Get on stage and fight. He glanced at the person who came, probably in his 40s, wearing a suit that didn't fit well. His face was full of fat, his eyes the size of beans were wide open, a bit fierce, and a bit comical. Li Yan quickly lowered his head, let go of the man's wrist, and glanced at the wall with his peripheral vision. Sure enough, there were only messy smoke stains left, and no words could be seen. The man was initially startled by Li Yan's gaze, but seeing Li Yan lower his head, he quickly regained his arrogance, adjusted his suit, spat on the ground, and muttered, "Silly. If he really can bring me to Hong Kong in 1986, then there's no reason why he can't cure my disease." Li Yan walked silently towards the boxing ring, his heart trembling slightly. "Next, please welcome our highest bet player tonight. He's awesome, claiming to clear all the stages tonight, defeating all 6 boxers under the stage." The greasy-faced host on stage shouted into the microphone with an exaggerated tone, trying to stir up the atmosphere of the scene. Li Yan didn't feel the slightest discomfort in this environment. The monster in the audiovisual shop aroused the long-lost fierceness in this man. He walked to the side of the boxing ring, was about to go up, but was stopped by a security guard wearing black sunglasses. "Over there." The man pointed at a few boxers standing under the ring. At this moment, the audience suddenly erupted with a deafening roar. Li Yan looked up and saw a dark-skinned, muscular man with his arms crossed, stepping onto the ring. "Cha-Chai! Cha-Chai! Cha-Chai!" Li Yan looked at the man called Cha-Chai with a smile that wasn't a smile. He was wearing a tight vest, his body was full of muscles. His knees and elbows were covered with thick calluses, seeming to feel Li Yan's gaze. Cha-Chai turned his head and stared straight at Li Yan below the stage. Li Yan exchanged glances with Cha-Chai for a while, then walked towards the 5 boxers standing under the stage waiting to be selected by Cha-Chai, but he was secretly surprised that he saw a faint red glow from this man, which others seemed not to notice. Even more interestingly, when he looked at these boxers around him, he saw the same red glow from them, only dimmer than Cha-Chai's. The host on stage shrugged and said in a deliberately relaxed tone, "No need for me to say how fierce Cha-Chai is, those who bet on him to win today have a lot to gain. Next, please Cha-Chai select his first opponent for today." Cha-Chai's wolf-like eyes kept staring at Li Yan until he reached the middle of the boxer's position, then he raised his hand to signal the host and pointed at Li Yan. There was a boo from the audience. This pale, tall and thin young man didn't look like a fighter at all. Some old gamblers at the boxing ring were even more certain. This man was a face they had never seen before, either a hot-headed young thug trying to make quick money, or a student forced onto the boxing ring because of too much debt. The host glanced at the document in his hand and shouted loudly, "Cha-Chai has selected boxer Li Yan. Li Yan, get on stage." Li Yan moved his shoulders and neck a bit, and climbed onto the stage. Cha-Chai showed a cruel smile and made a throat-slitting gesture towards the expressionless Li Yan. Li Yan stared at Cha-Chai, who was swaying from side to side, his body slightly leaning back, and assumed a crouching stance. Some spectators whistled from the audience. "Young man, pretending to be Bruce Lee won't help you win. The first round, find an easy opponent and play a few rounds casually, the later rounds will be exciting." Many people in the audience came to watch the match with the hope that Cha-Chai could win 6 rounds in a row, not to mention those gamblers who bet on Cha-Chai to clear all the stages. This man named Cha-Chai was born in Trang Province, southern Thailand, and his Muay Thai teacher was the famous Comet of the South, King Nephew. He has been studying Muay Thai for 20 years and has kicked down countless sour orange trees. Without enough strength and confidence, Cha-Chai wouldn't dare to claim that he would clear all the stages on the Dragon City boxing stage. Suddenly, Cha-Chai charged over, a fierce and fast straight punch heading straight for Li Yan's face. His left foot barely paused, and the knee strike below his foot was ready to launch. This is also a common attack routine in Muay Thai, using a straight punch as a feint, opening up the situation with a knee strike, and once an advantage is gained, it is a storm-like elbow strike and knee strike. Li Yan stepped to the left, his left palm slightly curved to catch Cha-Chai's wrist, lifted it upward, his right hand straight through from the outside of Cha-Chai's right arm, aiming for Cha-Chai's neck. This ghostly speed startled Cha-Chai. His knee hadn't even been lifted yet, but the opponent's palm was less than a foot away from his throat. He instinctively dodged to the left, and Li Yan in front of him disappeared. Before he could recover, his knee felt like it had been hit hard with a small hammer. Cha-Chai's lower body softened, and he fell to the ground, his sweat the size of beans falling in a steady stream. Behind him was the cold-faced Li Yan, who had just stood up. In the front row of the stands, a man with a gold chain around his neck and a white suit tilted his head and muttered to himself, "Zishu passing the gate? Bagua Palm." The man in the suit saw clearly. Li Yan passed through Cha-Chai's armpit and kicked him in the knee pit. The boxers below the stage exchanged glances. Li Yan knocked out the Thai, Cha-Chai, in their first encounter. No one was willing to step into the ring at this moment. "Ha ha ha, young man, the boxing ring in Dragon City only opens when people place bets," said the man in the white suit who had earlier revealed Li Yan's strategy. You only got to fight because someone bet on Cha-Chai to win. If no one bets on you, you'll have to leave the stage. His pink shirt was open, revealing a corner of a demon tattoo. A smile appeared on his unusually pale face as he pulled out a thick stack of bills from his pocket. None of these guys can match you. Do you dare to fight my man? Win or lose, these $50,000 are yours. There were different levels in the Dragon City's ring. Like the fourth level that Li Yan had just fought, the boxer's income for winning was $5,000. This man in the golden suit was offering $50,000, 10 times the amount Li Yan would have to win 10 times to earn that in Hong Kong in 1986. A bowl of noodles cost $10, a pack of Marlboro $20. $50,000 was a considerable sum. At first, Li Yan didn't care much about the 50,000 Hong Kong dollars. He could only stay here for a month, let alone whether he would live to spend the money. But when he shifted his gaze to the $50,000, he saw a unique inscription. Hong Kong dollars, 50,000. Valuable item, can be exchanged for 5 yen floating points. This type of item can only be exchanged after you confirm its ownership. Note, even 1 yen floating point is something you crave. The small-eyed fat man who was initially arrogant towards Li Yan came over with a smile. Brother 9, Brother 9. The man in the white suit didn't even look at him, his eyes fixed on Li Yan on the stage. So, are you going to fight or not? Brother 9. The fat man was sweating profusely, but he had to force a smile. Brother 9 is in a good mood and wants to bet on boxing. You can pick any boxer here, and I'll immediately let them fight for you. But letting your man on the stage, that's against the rules. Only then did Brother 9 shift his gaze to the greasy face of the fat man, his tone unfriendly. Fat boy, are you stupid? Do I want to spend $50,000 to watch garbage fights at the 4th level? Do you think I'm a fool? Brother 9, how dare I? The fat man wanted to say something more, but Brother 9 interrupted him. You don't have to say anything. I just want my man to play around. I've paid enough money. Is there any rule in the committee that outsiders can't go on stage? If Tai Sui blames me, I'll apologize to him, right? Get lost while I'm in a good mood. Caught between a rock and a hard place, the fat man glanced at the committee's registration staff, saw them nodding, and then slinked away. Kid, you're in luck. He gritted his teeth and walked over to Li Yan, whispering. This guy is a rising star in the United Front, a gangster. You fight well, then take a few punches and lie down, and you'll get $50,000. You know what I mean. Li Yan blinked, a gangster, huh? Watch your step and take care of yourself. Alright. Li Yan looked relaxed, despite the high fever, bleeding, and inflammation displayed on his status bar, all complications of leukemia. His physical condition was actually very poor, often feeling weak, experiencing inexplicable gum bleeding or nosebleeds, and even once fainted during training. But Li Yan felt this was his peak moment in months. The sensation of flesh-to-flesh punches, the salty taste of blood rolling between his lips, all these stirred up the fury deep in his heart. That strong feeling of being alive. Brother 9 in the floral shirt smiled, patting the shoulder of a freckled young man next to him. Xiao Zhou, I know you've been impatient. Go up to the ring and play with this Bagua Palm master. Xiao Zhou was not tall, with a head of sharp short hair and a murderous look in his eyes. He stood up, didn't walk down the aisle, but directly jumped down from the stands and then got on the ring. Brother 9 in the floral shirt looked at the indifferent Xiao Zhou and shook his head with a smile. His little brother was a native of Shandong and also a practitioner of traditional martial arts. He wasn't a superficial practitioner with only 3 to 5 years of experience but had immersed himself in it for over a decade. He was skilled enough to teach in any martial arts school in Hong Kong and was a capable lieutenant of his own. Years ago, Xiao Zhou had a sparring session with a Bagua Palm master from the Qing school and suffered a great loss. He was hit and broke 5 ribs, and his right ear became deaf. So, for many years, he had always hoped to have another match with a Bagua Palm successor to avenge his loss. But Bagua Palm was mostly taught in Beijing and Tianjin, and Bagua Palm schools were rare in Hong Kong. In Kowloon walled city, Brother 9 in the floral shirt did know a legitimate Bagua Palm successor. But even if he had 10 times the courage, Brother 9 would not dare to ask him to practice with his brother. Standing on the ring, Xiao Zhou cupped his hands in a salute, looking more like an old-school martial artist than a gangster. Do family fist, Zhou Weidao, let's begin. Li Yan gave him a glance. Hejian, Li Yan. A hint of irritation flashed in Xiao Zhou's eyes. He stepped forward, elbowing straight at Li Yan's chest. Li Yan lightly stepped back, dodging most of Xiao Zhou's elbow force, his left arm moving from bottom to top to catch Xiao Zhou's elbow, his right foot kicking toward Xiao Zhou's shin. When Li Yan touched Xiao Zhou's elbow, he felt a strange force from Xiao Zhou, who was able to withdraw as soon as he released his force. Li Yan was surprised. Interesting. There was a gleam in Xiao Zhou's eyes. His body rotated, avoiding Li Yan's foot, and his left fist, like a hammer, hammered towards Li Yan's temple. Li Yan squinted. Instead of advancing, he retreated, sidestepping into Xiao Zhou's arms, his right hand forming a claw and grabbing Xiao Zhou's 60-degree fist wrist, intending to break Xiao Zhou's wrist. The Du family fist originated from the old Hong fist and was good at grappling and elbow strikes. Now Li Yan was using grappling to deal with him, and Xiao Zhou couldn't help but sneer that he didn't mind Li Yan grabbing his left hand, bent down, and reached for Li Yan's crotch. Li Yan reacted quickly, raising his knee to block Xiao Zhou's palm. At the same time, his right hand exerted force to the outside, intending to twist Xiao Zhou's left hand. Who knew that a strange force came from his hand? Li Yan couldn't twist Xiao Zhou's hand at all, and at the same time, Xiao Zhou's fist was already pounding towards Li Yan's chin. Expert. At this moment, Li Yan finally realized that the gangster he had encountered on the underground black boxing ring in Kowloon Walled City was actually an expert in the Du family fist, who fully understood the essence of the fist's virtual and real force. He let go of Xiao Zhou's wrist and retreated quickly. Brother Nine in the floral shirt leaned over, his eyes fixed on the ring. And only when he saw Li Yan retreat did he relax his clenched fist. Xiao Zhou on the stage stared coldly at Li Yan and slowly said, "You're very arrogant." Li Yan squinted his eyes and chuckled. "I just didn't expect that a little gangster from a gang could actually be a master of Du's boxing. It's a pity that Wensheng's boxing legacy was snatched by an outsider." This seemed to touch a nerve in Xiao Zhou, and he spat out a mouthful of disdain, sneering at Li Yan non-stop. "What right do you, a murderer who snuck into Dragon City from the mainland, have to accuse me of taking shortcuts?" If Dong Haichuan knew he had such a disciple, he would probably jump out of his coffin to clean up his house. Li Yan didn't take Xiao Zhou's mockery to heart at all. He said cheerfully, "Well, I'm going to get serious now. Bring it on." As soon as Xiao Zhou finished speaking, Li Yan, who was at least 5 steps away from him, suddenly appeared in front of him. That pale and cold face was directly pressing towards his own eyes, like a ghost. Just then, a clear voice came over. "It's rare that Brother Nine graces our Dragon City's martial arts competition with his presence. But I haven't heard that a stick fighter from Lianqing has followed our groom from Dragon City." As soon as these words came out, they immediately attracted the attention of everyone on and off the stage. Outside the hall, about 30 or so people in black suits with unsightly expressions and guns at their waists were gradually approaching. Upon seeing this, Huashan Nine's face quickly darkened. As the speaker entered the scene, the crowd on either side retreated like a tide. This was a young man in his 20s, draped in a leather jacket, tall and slim, with a baby-faced, fair complexion, reminiscent of a student still in school. Floral shirt. Nine leaned back in his seat, speaking casually, "Red Ghost, you scared me. What's up? Did old Ghost Wu have a falling out with us, and even the people from Liansheng are being kicked out of Dragon City so aggressively?" The young man called Red Ghost walked over to Floral Shirt 9, sat down next to him, lit a cigarette, and mumbled, "The grievances between Liansheng and Mr. Wu have nothing to do with us who make a living on the boxing ring. We follow the Tai Sui. But you treat my boxing ring like a chicken farm, going up and down as you please. Isn't that breaking our rules? Can anyone who comes to watch the boxing match go up to the ring at will in the future? Then how can we collect receipts for boxing bets? Don't you think so?" Floral Shirt 9 snorted and pointed at Li Yan in the boxing ring. "I'll just say it straight. My little Zhou has been wanting to find a Bagwazang master to spar with for a long time, and you must have heard about it. It's not me, Floral Shirt 9, who's causing trouble. I'm afraid that once I leave here, your people won't even agree to meet me. After all, old Ghost Wu and Tai Sui both work in the Dragon City Committee, and will inevitably cross paths. I understand that you don't want to get involved in my mess. Let's be clear, I don't intend to break Dragon City's rules, I just want my man to fight a match with your boxer. If you can't even agree to this, then it's clear that you're just bullying us." Red Ghost crossed his arms and slowly shook his head. "Rules are rules. I can't interfere with other things, but today, if your man goes up to the ring, it's causing trouble in Dragon City." Floral Shirt 9 laughed in anger. "Well, then there's nothing to discuss, Brother 9. Little Zhou jumped down from the ring and stopped Floral Shirt 9. He then addressed Red Ghost. "You just said that I followed the grooms of Dragon City. Does that mean that as long as I follow the rules and go up to the boxing ring to fight, I can spar with him?" Red Ghost lifted his eyelids. "Then you have to start from the first ring. If the committee determines that your performances are similar and someone is willing to place a heavy bet, then of course there's no problem." "Okay, then I'll start from scratch in the Dragon City ring." Red Ghost nodded, his indifferent face turned towards Floral Shirt 9. "What does Brother 9 say?" Floral Shirt 9's face was so dark it was frightening, and he didn't say a word. Little Zhou walked over to Floral Shirt 9, his throat bobbing. "Brother 9. Floral Shirt 9 glanced at him. Since when did the boss not care about his own men? Little Zhou laughed a little sheepishly. "Brother 9, I can handle this matter myself." Floral Shirt 9 muttered something, probably a curse. Let's go. Floral Shirt 9 stood up from his seat and led a group of about 40 or 50 people out. A few young punks even looked at Red Ghost, who was sitting steadily, with provocative faces before they left. Red Ghost simply chose to ignore them. Before leaving, Little Zhou walked up to Li Yan. Master Li, there aren't many traditional martial artists in the boxing ring of Kowloon Walled City. Today was not satisfying. Once I've established myself in the Dragon City ring, we'll have a good fight. Li Yan nodded and spoke. I say, Master Zhou, does the $50,000 that your brother Nine mentioned still count? Little Zhou was taken aback and nodded awkwardly after a while. Count, you have earned 5 Yenfu points. You have opened an additional purchase privilege, 0/1, in this Yenfu event. Your purchase quota is as follows: 1. A quick glance category, skill scroll quality, ordinary. You can obtain personal information from others, with a certain chance of detecting their weaknesses. You can use this skill directly. Each time you obtain others' information consumes 1 Yenfu point, or you can choose to spend 10 Yenfu points to purchase this skill. Once purchased, you can use this skill at will point 2. ES Hematopoietic Cell Enhancer category, consumables quality, excellent origin. Daeban Research Institute. It has a strong therapeutic effect on the physical damage caused by blood and hematopoietic cell disorders. It can also enhance the user's blood vitality. Ordinary people have a very small chance of learning the skill. Blood activation after use, you can spend 10 Yenfu points to get it. Point 3. ES Hematopoietic Cell Supplement category, consumables quality, rare, origin. Daeban Research Institute. It has an extremely strong therapeutic effect on blood and cell disorders, and can also enhance the user's blood vitality. Healthy individuals will learn the skill. Blood activation after taking it, you can spend 300 Yenfu points to get it. Please note that the additional purchase privilege that Taper has gifted you can be activated once in each Yenfu event. After 3 Yenfu events, the gift will disappear. Taper's message, newbie, I think I'm quite generous. After reading this information, Li Yan suddenly had an epiphany. ES Hematopoietic Cell Supplement, this is what the fat man promised could cure his illness, and all he needed to do was to get enough Yenfu points. At this point, Li Yan seriously considered what it meant to establish ownership. After all, this determined how Li Yan made money. After all, there were too many ways to make quick money in this world. Li Yan sat in a corner, pretending to be lost in thought, while a figure approached him. It was Red Ghost. You're Li Yan, right? How long have you been in Hong Kong? Li Yan looked up, pretending to rub his eyes. Just recently. Red Ghost crouched down. You follow me from now on, fighting under me. Money, women, I won't treat you badly, understand? Li Yan nodded with a cold face. Red Ghost smiled. Come with me. With that, he turned and headed upstairs. Li Yan got up without a word, secretly observing the young man in front of him, who looked kind but was called Red Ghost. Even Li Yan himself didn't notice that after staring at Red Ghost for just a short while, a ripple of blackness appeared in his pupils. You have obtained some information. Viewing it costs 1 Yenfu point. Do you want to view it? Li Yan weighed his options in his mind, but ultimately chose not to view Red Ghost's information. Simply following him up the stairs, the two men ascended to the rooftop, one after the other. The concrete roof was littered with tangled antennas, leaving no room to set foot. As far as the eye could see, there were buildings huddled together, haphazardly built high up, simple, dilapidated, crowded. But also busy, grand, exuding a vibrant atmosphere. Kowloon Walled City, it scares people to death when others mention it, but it's actually not bad here. I'll take you to eat dog meat hot pot when I have time. I guarantee you'll swallow your tongue. Red Ghost said so. Dragon City is famous for being a no-man's land, isn't it? Malaysia, Macau, Taiwan, every year who knows how many fugitives have no choice but to flee here. Either they become hit men for the gang, or most of them end up on the boxing ring of Kowloon City, just like you. He paused for a moment, then continued, 90% of the Miss Whites of Hong Kong originated from here. Half of the population of Kowloon Walled City has tried drugs. Arms smuggling, human trafficking, gambling dens, brothels, a pandemonium of vices. There are countless gangs, such as the Wixinghua, 14K, and Hung Hing. He pointed with a finger. But here in Dragon City, no one dares to cause trouble. The committee does not allow it. If the committee speaks, there isn't a single gang that dares to say no. Here, even the governor of Hong Kong is not as powerful as the committee, you understand? Red Ghost didn't expect Li Yan to respond and continued speaking. You fight in Dragon City to earn a living with Tai Sui, who is the executive member of the Dragon City Committee. Tai Sui is the behind-the-scenes boss of all the boxing rings in Dragon City. I heard about your situation from Fei Bo. You were quite fierce today, you knocked out Cha Kai with just 2 moves. Even Fei Bo admitted he misjudged you. When I first arrived in Hong Kong, I fell ill due to the change in environment. I'm just starting to recover. Red Ghost nodded without denying or confirming, and lit a cigarette, saying, Tai Sui appreciates young men with powerful fists. You have potential. Li Yan looked at the cramped, dilapidated buildings in front of him, seemingly indifferent, and asked casually, Brother Red Ghost, they told me I was fighting in the 4th ring. How much money can I make in the higher rings? Red Ghost took a drag from his cigarette. For the 4th ring, the venue is small, typically only workers and shop owners from Dragon City would watch. If you win a match, you can earn $5,000, and even if you lose, you'd still get $1,000. The first 5 rings are open every day. As long as someone is willing to bet on you, you can make money. The 6th ring isn't open daily, there are fewer fighters, about 3 or 4 times a week. If you win, you can get $30,000, and if you lose, you get $5,000. There are also various other fights. If someone is willing to pay more, cage fights, weapon fights, you can earn hundreds of thousands in one night. However, it often results in fatalities. Red Ghost talked about it casually, but Li Yan could imagine the bloody scene on the boxing ring, 2 men fighting with weapons, risking their lives, while the crowd in the stands roared in excitement. Thinking about this, a cold glint flashed in the corner of Li Yan's eyes. Splash! A shoe stepped into the muddy water, causing a large splash of dirty spray. A mouse, not much smaller than a cat, was startled and scurried past Li Yan. The air was filled with the rotten smell emanating from a fishball processing factory behind the building. No matter how legendary the Kowloon-walled city, this slum seemed in the eyes of later generations, dirtiness and decay were its true colors. The glitzy parts of the city were out of reach for Li Yan at the moment. A string of keys wrapped around Li Yan's thumb, belonging to a room in the apartment building with mottled walls in front of him. The keys were given by Red Ghost, a welcome gift to Li Yan, so he didn't have to squeeze into a room with those low-level boxers. It was only a 15-minute walk from here to the Longjin Road where the Kowloon Ring was, which was convenient for Li Yan. Boxers in Dragon City needed to find suitable managers, or so-called Dragon City stablemen. When and how the boxers fought were all arranged by the managers. Li Yan's previous manager in Dragon City was a small-eyed fat man named Fat Bo. Now, his manager was naturally Red Ghost. Compared to Fat Bo, who could only bully others in the 4th ring, Red Ghost was a well-known figure in the whole Dragon City ring. He stepped onto the ring at the age of 13 under the name of Chen Minhong, became the master of the 6th ring at 21, and was known for his fierce boxing and heavy blows. The nickname Red Ghost also spread from that time. After retiring, he worked for Tai Sui and was one of the most relied on managers by Tai Sui. Even the chairman of the committee, Wu Haoshi, greeted Red Ghost with a smile when he saw him. Boxing under Red Ghost was a great joy to celebrate with fireworks and roast goose in the eyes of people like Fat Bo. But now, Li Yan, who had ascended to heaven in Fat Bo's eyes, was groping for change in his pocket with a grim face, showing no sign of complacency. 300 yen floating points, that's a full 3 million Hong Kong dollars, should I rob a bank? Although Mole had given Li Yan 3 times the yen floating event time to raise these 300 yen floating points, Li Yan obviously couldn't wait that long. He was thinking about making it in one step, earning 3 million Hong Kong dollars in a month in the Kowloon-walled city in 1986. Meow. Li Yan looked down and saw a little orange kitten pacing back and forth at his feet, occasionally bumping its nose against his pant leg. Ami. A childish girl's voice came from the stairs above. Li Yan looked up and saw a 13 or 14-year-old girl on the stairs. She was wearing a washed-out white shirt, barefoot, and looked a bit timid. Meow. The kitten heard its owner's call, jumped over to the girl in a few leaps, and made a purring sound in its throat. I'm sorry, sir, Ami always likes to run around. Li Yan smiled, your cat is very cute. Saying that, he entered the apartment and began to look for the room number Red Ghost had told him. Little girl, do you know where room 413 is? The little girl nodded when she heard this, picked up her cat, and signaled Li Yan to follow her. After about a minute or two, the little girl stopped. She pointed to the number on the door next to her. Here it is. Thank you, little girl. Then, brother will buy you some candy. Li Yan took out 2 milk candies from his pocket and handed them to the little girl. The candy was bought on Longjin Road to relieve his own pain. Axiu, who are you talking to so late? A woman's voice, a little hoarse and obviously short of breath, came from the room behind Li Yan. No, Mom, I went downstairs to find Ami. Seeing the candy in Li Yan's hand, the girl was a bit hesitant at first, but when she heard the voice from the room, she quickly said goodbye to Li Yan and went back into the room. Li Yan unwrapped the candy paper, stuffed a piece of milk candy into his mouth, and didn't think much about it, took out the key and opened his room door. It's better to have a mother and daughter across the door than some troublemaking women. At least Li Yan didn't want to branch out for now. Although the room was small, it was relatively clean. It was just that the fishy smell from the fishball processing factory behind the apartment was too strong, and it could be smelled even with the doors and windows closed. Li Yan was just looking for a place to stay, so he didn't care too much and went straight to bed after a brief tidy-up, late at night, in a gambling den. Open. 12 points, big. As the dice stopped spinning, a middle-aged man in a disheveled suit with a receding hairline collapsed on the ground, faintly smelling of alcohol. Some of the people crowded around the gambling table were ecstatic, while others were gnashing their teeth, but no one looked at him, as if the middle-aged man with an ugly face as if he were about to have a heart attack was a pile of garbage to be swept onto the street. Come on, no change after buying. The dice-rolling black teeth tie, with disheveled hair and a half-burnt cigarette between his blackened teeth, was shouting enthusiastically. Wait, I'm still betting small on this one. The middle-aged man with red eyes screamed hoarsely. Get the money, old man. Black Teeth Tie swallowed a thick phlegm and shouted at the middle-aged man in a haughty tone. He had sharp eyes and naturally saw that the middle-aged man didn't have a penny left. If he dared to make a fuss about gambling with his fingers or something provoking at this time, Black Teeth Tie would definitely have someone drag him to the back, strip him naked, and throw him into the sea to feed the sharks. The middle-aged man's lips were trembling as he took out a flat wooden box from his bosom. How much is this worth? When the wooden box was opened, there was a pale yellow rice paper inside. The intertwined gold patterns on the paper depicted a lifelike Kuei ox, with golden hair visible all over its body, standing on one foot on the ground, sitting and howling at the sky. The back of the paper was filled with small characters. Without thinking, Black Teeth Tie slapped the wooden box and the rice paper inside onto the middle-aged man's face. Screw you, bringing a box of toilet paper and wanting to exchange it for money? Do you think you can get money with hell money? If you don't have money, get out of here. The middle-aged man was knocked back, with 2 streams of nosebleed flowing down his lips to the ground. He got up and walked out in a huff, muttering to himself. Ignorant, it's an antique. He dusted himself off and staggered out, not realizing that walking drunk on the narrow streets of Kowloon City was the most eye-catching. Rotten boy, talking nonsense. He was still complaining, but he didn't notice a figure sneaking up behind him, taking advantage of his distraction, and the cement block in his hand hit him hard on the back of his head. The middle-aged man fell on cue, and the man squatted down and frantically searched his pockets, but found nothing. Just as he was about to give up, he noticed the fancy gold-plated rice paper in his hand, snatched it, looked around to make sure no one was watching, and turned to leave. At this moment, a hand suddenly grabbed his trouser leg tightly, tripping him to the ground. The middle-aged man was covered in blood, moaning in his mouth. Help me, help! The man was trembling all over, desperately kicking the chest of the middle-aged man, trying to make him let go, but the middle-aged man held on tightly and refused to let go. He was panting heavily, his anger rising from his heart to his gall. He fumbled for the blood-stained cement block he had just thrown on the ground, raised it high with both hands, and smashed it down. Bang! Li Yan's palm came down and hit his opponent's face directly, knocking him unconscious. This kid is sharp, he's won 5 games in a row tonight. What the hell, this guy is clearly not at the 4th ring level, why is he still allowed to play? Red Ghost leaned against the edge of the ring and waved his hand to signal Li Yan to come down. What's the matter, Red Ghost brother? Li Yan asked half-jokingly. Red Ghost gave a bitter smile. If you keep playing like this, even an idiot would know to follow you blindly, making my ring lose money. Come with me, your last game tonight is at the big venue. Okay. Where to? Red Ghost threw his cigarette butt on the ground. Fui Building. The Fui Building, as mentioned by Red Devil, stood on the Longjing Road as a towering edifice of blue-black. As they rode the elevator, Red Devil casually mentioned to Li Yan, those who come to Fui Building for boxing matches are either wealthy or noble. The least they spend in a night is over $1 million. The boxers here get a cut too. If you wish to secure your footing here, you need a big sponsor behind you. I'll handle that for you. Just don't mess it up. The elevator quickly arrived and came to a halt. As the doors slid open, Li Yan couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. The entire building from the 10th floor upwards was open, reaching a height of about 30 meters, with 4 tiers of viewing stands. 16 fringed lanterns hung high, and the wooden staircases were carpeted in red. In the middle, a marble ring was surrounded by columns of Han white jade, all giving off an antique vibe. Black tuxedoed female attendants bustled about, serving drinks to the guests. The large TV screens, each 2 meters high, were placed on all 4 sides facing the stands, ensuring the guests could clearly see the boxers from any angle. Like it? It's quite a spectacle, isn't it? You're out of luck today, there are usually bunny girls to see. Red Devil joked with Li Yan when a tuxedoed attendant hurried over. Red Devil, Mrs. Deng wants to see you. Red Devil rubbed his face, then said to Li Yan, here comes our big sponsor. With that, he led Li Yan up the escalator and into a private room. Li Yan didn't quite understand why women would be attracted to the bloody spectacle of the boxing ring, but he supposed there were all sorts of people in the world. The 2 of them entered a small private room. As soon as the door opened, they saw bits of tea-colored glass scattered all over the floor, the colorful lights flickering erratically. The tea table was laden with foreign liquor and snacks that Li Yan couldn't identify. A woman in her 30s was sprawled lazily on the sofa. She had wavy hair, long legs, a slim waist, and flirtatious phoenix eyes. There were deep dimples on her face, and the corners of her mouth were always curving upwards, giving her a somewhat formidable look. You wanted Red Devil, and you give me a corpse? Is he not in Fui and instead out in Long City having soup? Judy, Red Devil has really gone out, the tuxedoed female attendant said with a troubled face. A few others were cleaning up the broken bottles on the floor. Nonsense, I'm right here. Red Devil immediately spoke up as he stepped into the room. Everyone out. The tuxedoed attendants, as if granted a pardon, left the room. Li Yan glanced between the woman and Red Devil, intending to leave as well, but Red Devil shot him a stern look. Judy, why are you so upset? You'll get wrinkles. Red Devil sat down next to Judy, picked up 2 glasses of wine, and spoke sincerely to her. The woman took the glass, nodded her head, and complained, you finally show up. I haven't seen you all night. What have you been up to? Did you know I was coming to Long City and deliberately avoided me? Of course not. I went to check on the new blood. Red Devil sounded innocent, and with his boyish face, he had quite an effect on the woman. Li Yan, come here. Li Yan reluctantly walked over and managed to squeeze out a smile. Judy. Judy looked Li Yan up and down. His cheeks were thin, his cheekbones prominent, and his chin outlined a beautiful groove. His sword-like eyebrows slightly raised, his eyes steady. Judy took a sip of golden liquid, making her lips even more enticing. He's quite handsome. I wonder if he can hold his own, though. I like them good-looking, but if they can't last a few rounds on the stage and get knocked down, it's quite embarrassing for me. The last boxer I sponsored lost, and that scum He Changhong dared to mock me. Suddenly, her eyes lit up. Why don't you fight, Red Devil? I'll sponsor you no matter how much it costs. Sure. Red Devil nodded and drained his glass. But we should give the newcomer a chance. How about this? If Li Yan loses, I'll step in and clean up for Judy against Mr. He. Judy flashed a sweet smile. Deal. She turned to Li Yan. Little brother, you need to last a bit longer. Li Yan lowered his head and gave a faint smile. Judy, you're joking. Red Devil is my boss. It would be embarrassing to force my own boss to fight. I'd rather jump into the sea. The woman laughed so hard she was shaking. Well, if you can hold on, I will definitely take care of you. Li Yan's temples twitched, but his smile remained, revealing nothing. Don't say I don't take care of you. Judy is a big sponsor of the Long City Ring. Her dead husband was a gentleman and she herself is worth billions. She spends 700,000 to 800,000 every night on drinks alone. If you can get on her good side, you're set. Li Yan rubbed his face like Red Devil had done earlier and asked, showing his teeth, so what do you want me to do? Red Devil clapped Li Yan on the shoulder. If you win tonight, you'll have secured your footing at the 6th ring. Show them what you've got. I, Red Devil, haven't taken in new blood in a long time. Don't disgrace me. As long as you don't ask me to sell my body, I'll even fight a tiger for you. Red Devil's face lit up with a shallow dimple. Get on the stage. Li Yan was the first to step onto the stage, scanning the betting spectators in the stands with his peripheral vision, and finally landing his gaze on Judy behind the glass wall of her box. This woman held a tall glass in her hand, revealing a section of her fair wrist, and raised an eyebrow at Li Yan on the stage. Worth billions, 3 million is just a drop in the bucket. As the cheers grew louder, Li Yan turned his head to look at his final opponent for the day. A man in his 30s, with a sallow complexion, stepped onto the stage. He was dressed in a black training suit and his expression was cold. This man, named Nan Jodo, was a fugitive wanted by the Japanese government. He had raped and murdered 7 young women in Hokkaido, dismembering his last victim, a girl only 14 years old. Unbeknownst to him, the girl was the only daughter of the vice president of the Inagawakai, and he had been hunted down by the Inagawakai ever since. He had fled to Long City, where he was safe for the time being, but it was clear that if he took one step out of Long City, he would meet a gruesome end. Nan was skilled in firearms and daggers, and also had a mastery of Okinawan Goju-ryu karate. Before facing Li Yan, he had already won 3 consecutive matches that night, with the lightest injury inflicted on his opponents being 2 broken arm bones and a ruptured kidney, causing them to faint in the ring. As soon as the white towel hit the ground, Li Yan sprang forward, his right hand swinging out like lightning to strike Nan's blocking elbow. His left palm aimed for Nan's neck in a swift, vicious move. Everyone was surprised that this newcomer dared to make the first move against Nan, but Red Devil's attention was on Li Yan's left foot, which had subtly advanced half a step. Nan twisted his waist, his backhand hitting Li Yan's incoming arm. His right hand shot out straight, aiming to grab Li Yan's upper arm. The moment his palm touched Li Yan's shoulder, a smile crept onto Nan's lips. He hadn't expected this tall, thin young man to be so easy to take down. But his hand didn't stop. His 4 fingers exerted force, and his thumb, like a hook, aimed for Li Yan's scapula and dug in. When Nan grabbed Li Yan's shoulder, a collective sigh rose from the stands that I end the previous 3 rounds. No matter how the fight had been going, once Nan got close and grabbed the shoulder, using his joint technique, his opponents hardly had any chance of turning the tables. Unexpectedly, Li Yan, who was seemingly at a disadvantage, suddenly raised his right leg, using the half-step advanced left foot as a pivot, and launched a kick like a soaring dragon. The tip of his shoe hit Nan's chin hard, causing Nan to throw his head back and spew a mouthful of blood into the air, his right hand also weakly letting go. Li Yan, seizing the opportunity, lunged forward, grabbed Nan, who was leaning backwards, by the wrist. A cold glint flashed in the corner of his eye. The Goju-ryu style originated from the white crane style of Southern Fist. Today, I'll let you pay your respects to your ancestors. Goju-ryu karate, although not as popular as Kyokushin karate, which became famous because of Majitatsu Oyama, is still one of the more well-known and practical schools within karate. It indeed originates from the traditional martial arts of the southern schools. The founder of Goju-ryu, Chojun Miyagi, was a disciple of the famous karate master Kanryo Higashiyama, who himself was a student of the renowned Fujian master Xie Zongxiang, known as Ho-Rusi. Miyagi also traveled to China to study martial arts. Both of their techniques are inherited from the White Crane school of southern Shaolin. Even the name Goju-ryu comes from the famous military work of the Ming dynasty, The Law of Hardness and Softness. As for why modern people flock to learn Goju-ryu, while traditional martial arts are dismissed as flowery boxing, this situation is rather ironic. The reasons are very complex and difficult to explain in a few words. Although Li Yan comes from a northern martial arts family, he spent a full 7 years in Guangdong. With a good foundation and high talent, his understanding of southern martial arts is no less than that of his contemporaries. When he said he wanted to show Nankyo the skills of the White Crane school, it was not an empty claim. Li Yan's fingers hooked Nankyo's wrist and turned it outward. His left hand's 3 fingers were together forming a bird's beak, and he stabbed fiercely at his armpit like an iron awl. Nankyo, who had been through many battles, reacted very quickly despite suffering a great loss. Instead of trying to pull away, he endured the pain in his right arm as if it had been stabbed with a steel nail, bumped into Li Yan's chest, and wrapped his right hand around Li Yan's waist like a steel whip. He tried to bite Li Yan's ear like a street fighter. If their fighting experience was not rich enough, even the older generation of martial artists with a higher level of fighting skills could easily be dragged back into the situation by this beast-like bite and tear. Unfortunately, Li Yan, who was only 25 years old, had a fighting experience that was jaw-dropping, earning him the nickname, the Thin Tiger of Hejin. These 4 words were earned by Li Yan with each punch and kick, each one stained with blood. Just as Nankyo's arm touched Li Yan's waist, Li Yan's right elbow fiercely slammed into Nankyo's face, making a dull thud. Blood and sweat splashed out, and 2 broken teeth spun in the air and flew out of the ring. Nankyo was stunned by the elbow strike to his head, and Li Yan's hands, like arrows, fiercely bombarded his opponent. The audience under the ring clearly saw that only Nankyo's heels were touching the ground. His whole body seemed to be broken in the middle, like a shattered doll. Under Li Yan's rain of punches, the double insert arrow of the crane fist. Single split fight. Left and right split palm, double snake tongue. Grasp hammer. Crane top. All of these moves were poured onto Nankyo's body. Large patches of blood stains soaked through, and the fierce punches almost smashed Nankyo to pieces. Damn, the gamblers were dumbfounded, their throats seemed to be strangled, their eyes wide open and unblinking, staring at Nankyo's body that was quickly being soaked by blood. They didn't even notice that the cigars in their mouths were about to burn out. It took 3 breaths of time before Nankyo fell to the ground with a thump. Large patches of blood stains soaked through, and waves of blood foam sprayed out from his mouth and nose. After a while, he stopped convulsing. The ring was silent for a moment. Li Yan straightened up, blood dripping from his fingers onto the ring. He shook his fist, turned around, and looked at the stands. At this moment, the Fukuoka building erupted into a roar of cheers and screams. That's the spirit. That's satisfying. I bet $1 million on this kid to win. I'm backing him. Handsome, let's have another weapon fight. Li Yan looked around at the audience in the stands. A hint of madness flashed in his eyes, but it was quickly hidden. Red Ghost nodded in satisfaction. Good fight. The small box had darkened by this time, and no one could see what was going on inside. Under the psychedelic lights, there were enticing and continuous panting sounds. In the LCD screen, Li Yan's hands were dripping with blood, his eyes were defiant, his smooth muscle lines contained astonishing explosive power, and were also soaked with the scent of male hormones. The panting went from low to increasingly rapid, and finally ended with a satisfied sigh. A slender hand groped around in the dark, knocking over a wine glass without noticing. After a while, it found an open bottle of champagne. Judy's face was flushed, and sweat dripped down her smooth collarbone. She picked up the bottle and poured it over herself. It took a while for her to recover from the afterglow. She rolled over, propped herself up on her arm, and looked at Li Yan on the screen. Her seductive face had a twinkle in her eye, and the corners of her mouth turned up in a smirk. What's so big that it requires Mr. Li to take action? The commissioner of the Kowloon Walled City Executive Committee, and the head of the Dragon City security team, Si Lijing, made a cup of tea and handed it to an old man with half-white hair and a serious expression. Li Yaoguang, the chief detective of the Hong Kong police force, is known as the white-haired detective. Commissioner Si, I'll be frank, I want to dispatch the Flying Tigers into Dragon City to handle a case. Si Lijing shrugged his shoulders. When has the Hong Kong police had to report to the committee when handling cases? It's up to Mr. Li to decide. As he said this, he took a sip of tea, a glint flashing in his eyes. But to dispatch the Flying Tigers, has someone tried to assassinate the governor? Mr. Li placed 4 photos on Si Lijing's desk. What's their story? Si Lijing asked casually. They are members of the Big Circle Boys. Si Lijing's eyebrows furrowed, as if he had been burned by the tea. This leader is called Adong, he has a criminal record. The other 3 are his fellow villagers. 4 days ago, they robbed the Fongbao Bank of over 4.6 million Hong Kong dollars and about $20 million worth of jewelry, as well as a batch of antiques. They killed 5 security personnel during the robbery. This group is accurate with their guns, daring, and difficult to deal with. When the police surrounded them, one of them was shot, and although most of the property was recovered in the end, the whereabouts of the antiques are unknown. We have sealed off Tseung Kwan O and Kun Tong. We have checked all the hospitals in Hong Kong and have not found their whereabouts. As he said this, Mr. Li took out another photo. The man in the photo was a middle-aged man with a receding hairline. This man was the bank manager of Fongbao Bank. He has been fired by Fongbao. We have always suspected that he was collaborating with the Big Circle Boys, or even that the Big Circle Boys were brought in by him. However, his body was found in Kowloon Walled City last night. He was killed by repeated blunt force trauma to the head, and the clues have been cut off. The old man knocked on the table. This case has now shocked the whole of Hong Kong. The only place in Hong Kong where private clinics would be willing to accept them is Kowloon Walled City, and the bank manager died here. So, I hope the committee can help us find their whereabouts. Si Lijing didn't hesitate for long. After weighing the situation, he responded with great certainty. 3 days, as long as these people are really in Dragon City, I will find them within 3 days. Mr. Li's tightly furrowed brow relaxed slightly. Then I'll have to trouble Commissioner Si. These people are desperate and capable of anything. If you find them, don't scare them off, leave it to the police to handle. Police-civilian cooperation. Si Lijing with a grin, by the way, what kind of antiquities did they rob? I'll have someone look into it for any clues. Li Yaoguang handed over a list of antiques. Si Lijing scanned it with his eyes, and the first line read, Master Lin Yutong's treasured ancient novel, The Hook Sinks Record. Shiramado Minami died a horrible death. This was the first time in Li Yan's life that he had killed someone. For someone like Shiramado Minami, Li Yan found it hard to feel any compassion. However, he understood that if he were the one to die in the ring, the gamblers would still cheer hysterically. He prided himself on being more clear-headed than others, not using justifications like, I'm just doing justice, or, he deserved it, to numb himself. He knew that his survival and Minami's death on the stage had nothing to do with morality. Under the fierce tiger's eyes, there are no trenches. In front of the mirror, Li Yan washed his hands and muttered to himself. The shirt-wearing Lianxing, the Wenxing boxing expert Xiao Zhou, his own manager Honggui, the big-mouthed Judy, and the unseen boss Taizai. Li Yan felt that he could grasp something, 3 million Hong Kong dollars, and even the ancient novel Hook Sinker, maybe even more. He left the bathroom and went to the dressing room to find Honggui, attracting the attention of many boxers along the way, the dark-skinned Filipinos, the vicious Malaysians, the wooden Vietnamese, and even a black man with a full face of muscles. All of them exuded a red light, light or deep. Through a few days of pondering, Li Yan roughly understood the role of the red light. Only when someone harbors hostility towards him will they emit a red light. The greater the threat to him, the stronger the red light. This seemed to be a special privilege for him as a Yanfu walker, which others could not see. Among these people, the deepest red was a Vietnamese man in combat uniform, cleaning his dagger. At least Li Yan felt that his red light was not less than that of Xiao Zhou, a Wenxing boxing expert, and maybe even more. As for those who pose no threat, they will emit varying degrees of white light. He passed through the dressing room and saw Honggui coming towards him. Yours. Honggui stuffed a stack of banknotes into the pocket of Li Yan's shirt. I'll open an account for you later, and transfer the money you won from boxing into it. What's this? Li Yan pointed to his pocket. Honggui looked at Li Yan with a half-smile. It's from Mrs. Deng, go buy some nice clothes, she wants to have dinner with you tomorrow. Li Yan nodded, said nothing. You must be hungry after all this, let's go, I'll take you for a late-night snack. Li Yan's eyes flickered slightly. Honggui, I just saw blood, I'm not feeling well, how about another day? You should replenish even more after seeing blood, let's go. Li Yan gave a crooked smile and didn't insist anymore. After getting to know him, this person called Honggui was much more humane than he thought. Contrary to what Li Yan had imagined, Honggui didn't take him to any pleasure house, but to a smoky hot pot stall, which somewhat disappointed Li Yan. The hot pot soup was quickly served, and the milky white boiling soup with red peppers made people's mouth water. This dog meat hot pot tastes really good, try it. Honggui greeted and picked up his chopsticks, took a bite and put it in his mouth. As the two ate and sweated, Honggui casually asked, "By the way, Yan, who did you learn boxing from? I saw you were playing Bagua before, why did you switch to Mingi today?" Li Yan looked at Honggui with a smile. "Honggui, you know a lot about traditional martial arts." Honggui shook his head, "Not really, who in Dragon City would dare to say they know martial arts on Taizai's territory? What I know is also taught by Taizai." Li Yan was moved. Is Taizai very knowledgeable about traditional martial arts? Honorary president of the Hong Kong Martial Arts Association, has kicked countless martial arts gyms in Hong Kong, and the title of Dragon City Boxing Ring Master is earned by Taizai's fists and feet. Do you think he is knowledgeable? Li Yan grunted and continued, "So what martial arts does Taizai practice?" "Hung Kun. Choi Li Fut." Honggui looked at Li Yan with an annoyed look, and laughed. "Are you asking me or am I asking you?" Li Yan grinned and replied, "I have apprenticed in Guangdong under a master of the Crane School, which is considered a formal apprenticeship." As he spoke, Li Yan's eyes flashed. "I don't know if Honggui has heard of Lei Hongsheng." Honggui thought for a while and shook his head. "No." Li Yan nodded and stopped talking. When he was eating meat and glanced at the corner of his eye, he saw a familiar figure, the bleached white shirt, the ill-fitting cloth shoes, and the orange kitten that kept bumping her trouser legs with its nose. The girl from his own door, seems to be called a show. She probably came out to work at night. After all, people living in Dragon City can't have good living conditions, but now this little girl seems to be in trouble. "Are you blind? Clumsy." A young man with a nose ring and a touch of red at the end of his hair pointed at his wet crotch and cursed viciously. Sorry. A show turned pale, as if frightened. "Sorry, your mother. Bring the boiling water." The young man grabbed the kettle on the table and splashed it towards the girl's face. A show instinctively dodged to the side. The boiling water splashed on the ground, raising a cloud of white mist. "You dare to dodge?" The man with the nose ring clenched his teeth, raised his hand and slapped her. With a pop, the girl's cheek swelled up at a speed visible to the naked eye. The man grabbed the girl's hair and pulled her to his side. The girl was in so much pain that tears welled up in the corners of her eyes, and her body curled up. The orange kitten was making a lot of noise around the man, making a mess. "Lick it clean." Just as the man with the nose ring was getting excited, his wrist suddenly hurt, and he could faintly hear a crack. Then his vision blurred, and a size 41 leather shoe almost flattened his nose. The man flew out, knocking over tables and chairs, and was drenched by a pot of boiling hot pot. "Just got splashed with hot water, I'll apologize for the little girl, okay?" Li Yan had a relaxed smile on his face, pulled the girl aside, and said to the man with the nose ring who had fallen to the ground. This made the more than 10 49ers stand up and encircle Li Yan, the machetes in their hands gleaming coldly. "Nobody move." Li Yan raised his eyebrows, and the one who spoke was actually the man with the nose ring. He staggered to his feet, his face full of resentment. "Pretty impressive, very good at fighting. Which gang do you belong to?" Hearing this classic line from Hong Kong movies, Li Yan almost laughed out loud. He didn't say a word, just shook his head. "It's so fun to play the hero, why don't you go all the way? You stab me in the neck with a knife and it's over, or I'll kill." Before the man with the nose ring could finish his words, Li Yan's hand had already pulled out the fruit knife on the table and stabbed it at the man's neck. Poochie. The sound of the knife cutting through leather made the man with the nose ring collapse instantly. He sat down on the ground, his hands tightly gripping the knife handle, his eyes bulging, and a warm liquid flowed out from his crotch. After a while, he found that his neck was cold. The fruit knife went in and out of his collar, and the chilling sensation gave the man with the nose ring goosebumps all over his neck. "I thought you were really not afraid of death." Li Yan looked down at the man with the nose ring, his face was half smiling. "Kill him." The man with the nose ring screamed hysterically. Li Yan's face flashed with ferocity, and he was about to burst into action when Honggui's student-like voice exaggeratedly called out from the table. "Wow, chopping people is so awesome, I'm lucky to see it." The man with the nose ring glared over, and when he saw the face of the man who was eating hot pot and sweating at the table, his fierce face instantly collapsed. Red ghost. You're here too." The red devil nodded with a laugh. "Good boy, but I've never seen you before. What are you doing with Hishan-chan?" The man with the nose ring wiped off a bead of cold sweat, his voice trembling. "Hishan-chan, 432 straw shoes redhead Sai, paying a visit to the head honcho, Mountain Knife Peng." "Oh, if you're talking about Four-Eyed Peng, I know. The red devil wiped his mouth. I frequent this shop. The little girl works hard here. Why are you so angry? Apologize to the little girl, pay for the tables and chairs, and then scram. The man with the nose ring nodded with a forced smile, and with a pleasant face, he approached the little girl. Little sister, I'm sorry. I'm a bit of a rough man, please forgive my rudeness. I apologize to you. Ah, Xiao hid behind Li Yan, too scared to speak. Boss. Redhead Sai took out some Hong Kong dollars from his pocket, handed them to the owner of the hot pot shop, slapped his chest, ignoring the soup ingredients still on his head. I'll cover all the damages here. With that, the man with the nose ring looked at the Red Devil. Brother Red Devil, you see, the Red Devil gestured with his hand. The man with the nose ring, as if pardoned, left the hot pot stand with his gang in a sorry state. Don't let it ruin your mood, keep eating. Li Yan pulled a Xiao to sit down, responding, Brother Red Devil really has clout. The Red Devil, with dog meat in his mouth, mumbled. Mainland China is reforming and opening up, being a gangster. It's a dead end. Li Yan took a big sip of white wine, his face flushed from the alcohol, but he said nothing. Today was his 5th day in Kowloon Walled City. Speaking of which, I didn't expect you to like this style. No wonder you had no response when I introduced Judy to you. Red Ghost glanced at Xiao, who was sitting next to him with her head bowed. She is my neighbor, you gave me the keys to the apartment, don't you remember? The apartment on Su Temple Street. Red Ghost realized. Li Yan picked up the little cat spinning under the table and put it on Xiao's lap. When do you get off work? I'll take you home to apply some safflower oil, and you'll be fine the next day. Ah, Xiao bit her lip and nodded. By the way, Ah Yan. Red Ghost took out an Ericsson from his pocket and slid it across the table. Li Yan took a look and exclaimed. Wow, brother Red Ghost, you're so good to me, giving me both a house and a mobile phone. Just to let you know, I'm not gay. Red Ghost gave Li Yan a look and said, you don't need to go to the ring tomorrow. Go buy a nice suit on your own, wait for my call to see Judy. If you dare to disappear on me, I'll throw you into the sea. Definitely, remember. Li Yan laughed and took the phone. The two ate until late at night before Li Yan took Xiao back to the apartment on Su Temple Street. It's so late and you're not home, your mother must be very worried about you. Go in, see you tomorrow. Li Yan looked at the door of room 412 next to Xiao and kindly said to the girl. Xiao looked up at Li Yan for a while and then said crisply, thank you, Brother Yan. Li Yan scratched his head, smiled at the girl, and walked into his own room. Bang! After the door was closed, the lights in the hallway were mostly off, casting a half-light, half-dark shadow on the girl's face. Li Yan, who had closed the door, was sweating from the pain. He stuffed a few pieces of sugar into his mouth, but it was of no use. The deep bone pain made Li Yan's face look a bit crazy. Since he came down from the ring, Li Yan began to feel waves of bone pain. This was also the reason why Li Yan initially refused Red Ghost. The white wine during the meal suppressed it a bit, but when he returned to the apartment, the pain became even more intense. After a long time, the bone pain gradually faded, and Li Yan, who was soaked in cold sweat, gradually relaxed. After a while, he took out some bills from his chest pocket and counted them. Judy, as expected, was a big source of income for Red Ghost. The money she threw out for Li Yan to buy clothes was more than 30,000. Plus the 50,000 that Red Ghost would give him for winning the boxing match tomorrow. The number of yen floating points in his hand would reach 13. Just to be safe, as soon as the money arrives tomorrow, he will first exchange the ES Cell Enhancer. If he falls ill on the ring, that would be a big deal. Besides, he still has no clue about the ancient novel hook-sinking record. Li Yan, lying on the bed, thought about these things and gradually fell asleep. Early the next morning, Li Yan rented a suit from a photo studio in Repulse Bay, took a bus and went around a big circle, truly appreciating the Hong Kong of 1986 that is hard to see in the future. If Li Yan had a wider heart, he could have gone to watch a movie by Anita Mui or Leslie Chung or even asked them for autographs. The space travel concert by Alan Tam, who has been in his own audio and video store for a long time, is also in these few days. The Beyond Band, which has been established for 3 years, released their first album, Goodbye Ideal, this year. In 1986, Hong Kong had too many things that had passed away and would never come back. Unfortunately, Li Yan still had to run for his life, so these ideas could only stay on paper. By the time Li Yan returned to Su Temple Street, it was around 2 in the afternoon. Kowloon Walled City was as cramped and dark as ever. You could often see addicts with pale faces and smoking on the street, forming a stark contrast with the wealthy scenery of Repulse Bay. As he walked into the corridor of the apartment building and turned the corner to go upstairs, a hurried figure bumped into Li Yan. Li Yan instinctively grabbed the other's wrist, but didn't expect the other's reaction to be no different from his own. And the way that person grabbed his wrist faintly revealed a bit of the flavor of the military's grappling fist. Li Yan looked at the other person in surprise. The man was in his 30s, dressed in a plaid suit, with thick eyebrows and big eyes, quite handsome, but his eyes were full of bloodshot, as if he hadn't had a good sleep for a long time. Sorry. The man let go of his hand and smiled kindly at Li Yan. No problem. Li Yan took a step forward, thought of something and turned around. Brother, where are you from? The man was stunned for a moment before replying. My hometown is in Hebei, a small place, Anwen County. Li Yan laughed out loud, patted the man's shoulder heavily. My hometown is in Hejian, not far away. I've even peed behind the broken kiln temple in Anwen County. Of course, Li Yan has been to Anwen County, because it happens to be the hometown of Dong Haichuan, the ancestor of Bagua Pong. Oh, fellow townsman. Hearing this, the man's eyes lit up. My name is Li Yan, what's your name, brother? The man shook Li Yan's hand and laughed heartily. He and Ong, they all call me Dong. An hour ago, at the Fui building. North of Longjin Road is Tai Sui's territory. Although I am responsible for the security of Kowloon Walled City, it is better for you, Hong, to send someone to look for people in Tai Sui's territory. Si Lijing pushed his Nanma glasses frame, his face looked calm. Red Ghost laughed shyly and said, Uncle Zheng, don't say such polite words. We ring horsemen have no energy to help the police find people. Uncle Zheng, you can search wherever you want, as long as you don't turn us over, there will be no problem. Red Ghost being so straightforward made Si Lijing somewhat uncomfortable. How about, you ask Tai Sui first, I'm not in a hurry. Among the 5 members of the Longqing Executive Committee, the chairman, Wu Haoshi, deals with drugs and is the largest drug dealer in all of Hong Kong. The other 2, one deals with human trafficking, the other deals with flesh business, and the remaining Si Lijing deals with gambling stalls, while Tai Sui only sticks to a ring, and his territory is the least of the 5. But even the most arrogant Wu Haoshi has to give Tai Sui face, because Tai Sui is crazy enough to make people worry. It's just a small matter. Si Lijing doesn't want to have a disagreement with Tai Sui over this. I'm going to bother Tai Sui with this kind of thing, wouldn't I be beaten up? Uncle Zheng, whatever you want. Red Ghost's tone was relaxed. To put it bluntly, the business of the Ring Horsemen was simply at peace with the world, unlike Wu Haoshi, who dealt with drugs, and had constant conflicts with various societies. That's fine then. Si Lijing nodded, and a bodyguard-like person outside the door walked in quickly. Boss, we found the person. Si Lijing put down his cigar, smiled at Red Ghost and said, It seems that there really is no need to bother Tai Sui. Then turned his head and asked, What's the matter? They found a familiar traditional Chinese medicine clinic, where the doctor secretly alerted the police. Now the police have entered the Dragon City. Where is that clinic? Si Lijing asked, while the indifferent Red Ghost lit a cigarette for himself. Inside apartment 22, Su Temple Street. The lighter almost burned the Red Ghost's eyebrows. He sprang up and shouted at the man, What the hell are you talking about? It's not easy to meet a fellow townsman here. What brings you to Hong Kong? Li Yan handed over a cigarette, asked with interest. Although Li Yan had only been in Hong Kong in 1986 for a few days, the strong sense of unfamiliarity and distance still made him feel a bit lonely. However, with his strong will, he would not easily show it, but now, Hyandong's familiar dialect made Li Yan feel incredibly close. Hyandong's expression darkened at the words. I originally brought a few fellow townsmen to try their luck in Hong Kong, but, are there other fellow townsmen too? Oh, they don't live here. Hyandong's gaze drifted for a moment and said, Enough about me, what are you doing in Hong Kong? Li Yan shook his head at him, You wouldn't believe me if I told you, let's forget about it. Upon hearing this, Dong showed a row of white teeth and said, What's there not to believe? Did you rob a bank and now being hunted by the entire Hong Kong police? Li Yan glanced at him, It's more thrilling than that, let's not talk about this. It's still early, I know a great dog meat hot pot place, my treat. Hyandong quickly waved his hand, Forget about it. A rapid vibration interrupted the heated atmosphere between the two. I have to take a call. Li Yan said. Hyandong nodded to go ahead. Hello, brother Red Ghost, it's only 2 o'clock, why the rush? Where are you now? Red Ghost's tone was particularly urgent. In the apartment. Li Yan frowned, he heard a sense of urgency from Red Ghost's tone. You idiot. Stay put in the room, that apartment is hiding a group of big circle boys, the flying tigers are on their way, be careful not to get caught in the crossfire. What did you say? Li Yan didn't catch on. There's a group of big circle boys who kill and rob in your apartment, the leader is called Dong. Heartless, kills without batting an eye. Ah, now I understand. Li Yan sighed, but brother Red Ghost, can I give you a small suggestion? What do you want to say at this time? Say it. Try to lower your voice when you talk on the phone next time, you're so loud that everyone around me can hear you, it's awkward. What did you say? Beep. Li Yan hung up the phone and quietly looked at Ah Dong in front of him. Fellow townsman, tell your friend not to talk nonsense, it's not nice to casually call someone heartless. Ah Dong said with a smile. Meow, a kitten ran out from nowhere, clawing clumsily at Li Yan's trouser leg. Ah me, you're naughty again. The girl ran down the stairs, picked up her orange kitten, looked up at Li Yan with a rare smile on her face. Brother Yan. Being heartless is not something you say out loud. Interestingly, Li Yan had been speaking to Ah Dong in a Hebei dialect close to Mandarin, but at this moment, he switched to a Cantonese with a slight accent. Behave, Xiao, do you have any change on you? Li Yan patted the girl's head. Yes. Ah Xiao nodded. Do me a favor, go out to the street and buy a pack of candy for me, okay? The girl obediently nodded, turned around and left. Then suddenly turned back. But you have to wait for me here. No problem. Li Yan nodded with a smile, watching the girl leave with the kitten, then he slowly turned his head. In front of him was a dark gun barrel, and a dense red light that made it hard for him to open his eyes.